Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, what's cracking? Welcome back to another episode of PhatMan Radio, sponsored by PhatMan.com. And I am your host, Darren PhatMan McDuffie, helping you become perfectly healthy and toned. So tonight I have a show that I'm very, very excited about. I started reading a book, and it actually led me to this particular guest. So I think that she has a lot of great things to share, and it's something that kind of flies under the radar. So I hope that you will enjoy the show tonight, and I hope that some of you will call in and ask some questions. You know, don't be shy. I know sometimes people are on the line, and I can see that you're on, and when I come to bring you on, you don't ask a question. But don't be shy. The way to learn is to ask questions and go about educating yourself. And when you have someone that's going to be able to answer your questions from an expert point of view, take advantage of that. So one thing I wanted to say tonight is, and I like to share things with the audience here, is that sometimes, I don't know why, but I've been doing the show for a while now, but I still get nervous. I still get those little butterflies inside my stomach, and it's as if I'm stepping on the basketball court for the first time like I did in 7th grade. And I remember all the butterflies I had in my stomach, and since that time in 7th grade and coming up through college, I probably played basketball in front of thousands of people, but I always get nervous before the show. Can't understand that. But I think sometimes nervousness is good. It keeps you on your toes, and I don't ever want to get sloppy. But I would encourage everybody out there to kind of come out your comfort zone every once in a while and try some things that you don't necessarily try. So I'm going to stop running my mouth and get the show started. Tonight, as I said, I was very excited about the show. I was actually reading a book called Sugar Shock by a woman named Connie Bennett. And she referred, actually she was talking about hypoglycemia, and it just so happens that she mentioned the name in the book, and as I go through things, I start Googling things because I want to know who people are. So I Googled Roberta Ruggiero, and I found out that she started a hypoglycemic support foundation, and I also found out that she lives right in Sunrise, Florida, which is probably about 10 minutes away from where I live here in Davie, Florida. So I was super excited to get her on, and I'm always excited to get anybody right here in Florida. And there's a couple of guests when I first started the show that are right in my neighborhood, Roberta being one, and the other person being was Raymond Francis, which is Never Be Sick Again. That's a great show. And I'm getting ready to call this show tonight an instant hit. I know we're going to have a good time. I spoke to Roberta over the phone, and we hit it off immediately, and I told her some things that I was intrigued by when I spoke to her. And it just seems like she's a very, very good person, and that she has a lot to share. So without further ado, let me bring on Roberta Ruggiero.
Thank you so much, Darren. I really, really appreciate it. I am very excited, and I feel those butterflies, too, and it's good to have them.
Yeah, it's always good to have them. I know, like I said, it always feels like I'm stepping on the basketball court. If you don't know, I'm a basketball player. We finally meet in person. You know I'm a basketball player because I'm 6'7". But
oh, my gosh. Okay.
So it always just feels like when I first stepped on the basketball court in middle school in 7th grade, I always get those same little butterflies. So, but like I said in the beginning of the show, it's always a good thing. So what I normally do, Roberta, is I start people off by telling the audience about your journey. How did you come to start the Hypoglycemic Support Foundation? But more importantly, how did you find out that you had hypoglycemia?
Well, I guess the story begins really, and I can't leave it out because it's important. It started way back in 1961. Right after my daughter was born, and I just couldn't wait until she was born. And something happened when I got home. Instead of being happy, go lucky, and be thrilled, I was just very, very depressed. I was very depressed. I had severe crying spells. And when I went to the doctor, he says, don't worry about it. This is very, very normal. It's after baby blues. So 1 month led into another, and they never went away. And what happened, in conjunction with the crying spells, I started now to get severe headaches. I started to get the shakes. I started to get insomnia, and I kept on going back to the doctor. And again, he said, don't worry about it. But this time he gave me Valium. This was my first introduction to a tranquilizer. So the months passed, and before you know it, I was pregnant again. So my son was born in 1963, and all the symptoms that I had after my daughter was born were compounded after my son was born. So I had severe insomnia. I had crying spells. I had severe fatigue. It was very difficult to get up in the morning. I had cold hands and feet where I remember so vividly my husband would wrap them up and practically sit on top of them because they were so cold to a point of being painful. And I would keep on going back to the doctor, and he says, I just don't understand, so we'll increase the Valium. And then he says, well, since I had such severe head pains, let's take some tests. So the scenario of going back and forth to the doctor, increasing medication, going in for numerous tests, lasted for 5 years. After 5 years, he says, Roberta, the tests are all normal. There's nothing physically wrong with you. He says, and I know you have these symptoms. I know you know that they're real. So I think maybe you should see a psychiatrist. Now, Darren, you're talking about the year of, like 1965, 66, 67. The psychiatrist was very frightening. Nobody went. Nobody talked about it. So I was so desperate to get better. I went to my first psychiatrist in 1967, and he looked over my history, and he says, well, he said, you maybe got married too young, had children too soon. I says, well, now what do I do? Help me. So he added to my list of medication. So now I was taking not only Valium, but Meloril and Tofranil and Thorazine, and then we started out with 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams. And when that therapy and all that medication didn't help, I went to my second psychiatrist in 1968, followed by a third one in 1969. And by this time, I was just, very frightened, very scared, very, very withdrawn. People were starting to talk behind my back, like, what's wrong, what's wrong? My mother even asked me, is your husband beating you? I don't know. That they can't find anything wrong, and yet you're severely depressed. You can't get to sleep at night. You can't get up in the morning. You have the shakes. You have blurred vision. I had a whole list of symptoms. So this third psychiatrist now, I started being sick in 61, so this was now almost 69 or 68. I don't even remember right now. But he said, I have something that I believe would help you. And I said, I didn't even ask. I says, whatever it is, I will take it. I will do it. I will take it. I just remember that you have to be hospitalized for it. I says, fine. So my husband, we lived in Queens at that time, and he took me to Regal Park Hospital on Queens Boulevard. I said goodbye, and I just figured I would be going, for some sort of treatment. I had no idea what the treatment is, but I trusted the doctor. I was going to get better. Well, when I went to, up the elevator and went to the room, and I realized, oh, my God, why are there bars on these windows? And when I got off the floor, they took me in a room, stripped me of all my clothes, my medal, my wedding ring, and then I started hearing screams and yells and saw patients. It was a scene from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then I realized what was happening, that I was about to have electric shock therapy treatments, which I had no idea that that's what I had signed up for. So when I begged to get out, to contact my husband, they said, we're sorry, since you had signed for a series, that was it. I had to have a series. Well, 2 or 3 weeks later, and after 8 or 10 treatments, I was a zombie. And it was something that I just wanted to forget, and I didn't talk about for umpteen years. So I came home. I hardly could function. And 6 months later, since I was even worse, I went back as an outpatient for, I think, 6 treatments. And then at that point, I said I just wanted to die. That was the end. So I went back to my original doctor, and he says, listen, he says, I don't know what to do. He says, maybe just moving, getting away, starting a whole new life, maybe that would be the best thing for you to do. At the same time, my husband had an opportunity to move down to Florida, and we said, please, let's go. So we packed up our children. They were young at that time, and took all our medication, all my medical history, and we came to South Florida. And at one point, I thought I was being better, and maybe I said, oh, the sun is shining, I'm going to be better. But we were at church one day, and one Sunday morning, and all of a sudden, while we were standing for a certain part of the Mass, I passed out. And I had no recourse but to go to one of the doctors down here that a friend had recommended. And he looked over my history, and he says, I don't know what to do. And he put me in the hospital for more tests. And while we were in the hospital, again, I was standing and talking to him, and he says, Roberta, I really don't know what to do. And again, while speaking to him, I passed out. And that's when he said, you know what? He says, out of all the tests that you had, you've never had a glucose tolerance test. I'm going to run it. And then he came back to me, and he says, Roberta, you have a severe case of hypoglycemia, and I swear to you, if you change your dietary habits, your symptoms will go away. And I thought, my God, this guy has to be crazy, you know. And that was really the start of me knowing, you know, at least the word hypoglycemia. I knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing about it. He gave me one sheet of paper with instructions as far as what to eat, and that was it. But you're talking about 1971, 72, you know, it took me years. It took me years to find out, you know, what is hypoglycemia. Every book that I read was very medical and very technical. It took me a while to find out the importance of vitamins, the importance of exercise, the importance of therapy. It took a long time. I had to go for hypnosis just to get off all the medicine that I was on. So I finally did it. And 74, 75, I went to school, I went to work, and I thought this was going to be my life. And then in 1977, there was a tiny little article, anyone having harmful effects of electric shock therapy, get in touch with this committee. It was the Committee for the Protection of Patients' Rights. And what they wanted to do was to show that here in South Florida, they were doing and administering electric shock therapy more than any other state. And they wanted some rules and regulations applied to it. So they asked if I would tell, they heard my story, they asked if I would go to Tallahassee and tell my story and see if we could revise the conditions surrounding the administration of electric shock therapy. And up until this point, I didn't tell anyone about it. I wasn't able to talk about it, but I sat my children down at that point. They, you know, were near teenagers, and I told them what Mommy had gone through. And, you know, I have a son and a daughter, and they were incredible. Go, Mom, get them. Go, Mom, we're behind you. We're not embarrassed. Don't be ashamed, please. And that's what happened. I went to Tallahassee. I got up on the stand, told my story, and before you know it, there was an article in the Miami Herald, shock treatment sends, woman to a one-woman crusade or something like that. So I started doing talk shows down here, especially Y100 was a talk show, very popular, with Tony Crabtree as a talk show host, and she invited me on. And she said that every time I went on, because I went on several times, she asked me to go back. She says people would call in, please, tell me more about hypoglycemia. Tell me more about the diet. What vitamins should I take? What should I do? And it was Tony Crabtree who suggested it. She says, Roberta, you need to start a support group. And I said, there's no way. I mean, I just want to share what I've gone through and what what has helped me, but I don't know how to start a support group. Well, she insisted. And at that time, I was working with the Hollywood Playhouse because I was a makeup artist. And I went